Recognition, power, and influence is your birthright, and this podcast shows you how to get there. Welcome to episode number 233. Today's episode, I'm breaking down what I have learned over the years through doing over 100 stakeholder interviews for my clients. I'm sharing with you some of the surprises I learned along the way, the surprises my clients has learned along the way, the promotions that these stakeholder interviews have directly led to. And most importantly, I'm giving you tools that you can begin to use right away to do your own interviewing. And let me just tell you right now, it's a little bit different than you're probably doing today. So make sure you listen to the entire episodes so that you can figure out how you can use the feedback from your boss and your boss's boss to directly advance your career. All right, let's get started. Welcome to Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and I teach you how to get promoted, get paid, and bring your whole self to the leadership table. I am on a mission to change organizations from the C-suite out because women are the new face of leadership, and we are doing it on our terms. Hello, corporate badasses. Welcome to another episode of Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and super excited, as always, to be here with you again this week. So today's episode is coming out in June, and we are just about ready to kick off the Summer of Magic 2024, and I'm so excited about this. If you haven't been listening to my podcast for a while and you're not sure what the Summer of Magic is, I'm going to link to some of the podcast episodes from last year and from the year before that talk about the Summer of Magic and celebrate the number of promotions that we're able to accomplish over the summer. Let me give you a quick backstory in that in 2022, I was noticing that a bunch of my clients were getting promoted while they were on vacation. And I began to ask myself, why is that? And what is the magical formula that I am teaching them that is allowing them to have success even when they're on vacation or maternity leave or sabbatical, or let's say that they're working half as hard as they used to the year before when they never got recognized. And now they are working smarter, not harder, and they're getting promotions over and over and over again. So I began to ask myself, why is that happening? And then I set different goals to challenge myself to see how many promotions that I could get in a short amount of time. And in 2022, I think I had the goal of getting like 9 promotions over the summer, and we were able to accomplish that goal and more. And then in 2023, I had the goal of getting 108 promotions over the Summer of Magic. And then in 2023, I set my goal to celebrate 108 promotions. And if you're following me on LinkedIn, which I'll also link to in the show notes, you'll see that I was able to accomplish celebrating 108 promotions from women all across the world who are getting promoted into higher level leadership positions. And then this year, I'm going to be celebrating over 432 promotions over the summer. So there's going to be a lot of action happening on LinkedIn, as well as my email list and just all the different ways that you can follow me. So go back, listen to the podcast episodes where I give you that magical formula for the Summer of Magic and how you can create promotions even while you're on vacation. And also follow me on LinkedIn and help me in this celebration. And if you are somebody who gets promoted during the summer of 2024, I want to celebrate you as well. So make sure you direct message me or tag me, hashtag Summer of Magic 2024, so that we can begin to add you into the mix. And I'm going to also be doing interviews and celebrations live on LinkedIn as well. So it's going to be really, really exciting. We're just getting started. I can't wait to celebrate you and all of the amazing women who get promoted this summer. Today's episode is a little bit of a detour from that. I've been doing a lot of stakeholder interviews inside of my Leadership Table Mastermind. This is a process that I started 7+ years ago when I started coaching immediately is that I wanted to make sure that I got feedback for all of my one-on-one clients from their boss and their boss's boss. And I wanted to interview them on my own without the client so that I could ask very specific questions for these leaders about what it would take for my client to advance to the next level of leadership. And these stakeholder interviews have been absolutely fascinating. The information that I learned, I was also able to put together various different steps of my promotion process based on what I was hearing in these stakeholder interviews. So now the women inside of my Leadership Table Mastermind, which is a 6-month program where you receive one-on-one coaching from me and also guidance and support from incredible women who have done the work to get themselves into higher level leadership positions. They've been where you are. And we have this amazing mix of women who are still trying to figure it out. They're still trying to swim in the pool and figure out how to get to the other side. And there's a lot of women who've gotten to the other side, but they still need that support and guidance because of course we do. And I think that's one of the incredible things about mastering executive leadership is that you realize not only is it hard to do it on your own, it's like almost impossible to really have the level of success that I know so many of you desire, whether that's to truly have that voice at the table or to not feel like you're on an island constantly having to prove yourself, or not to feel like you're in fight or flight. Either I get laid off or I don't get laid off, or I have to go find a new job, or I have a bad boss. We are really, truly walking the talk of executive leadership and changing the leadership table as a result. So that's part of my Leadership Table Mastermind. If it's something that you're interested in joining, I recommend that you reach out to me as soon as possible. I've been offering a promotion for one-on-one coaching throughout the Summer of Magic. So directly DM me or email me. If you're on my email list, just reply to one of the emails and ask for more information. We would love to have you and support you and highlight you and all the things. So as part of this mastermind, I do 2 stakeholder interviews. Most of the time it's with your boss and your boss's boss. Sometimes it's with other stakeholders at your organization, depending on your relationship with your boss or your boss's boss, because we all know that our boss and our boss's boss may not be the most supportive person. And I want to make sure that when I'm gathering this feedback for my clients, that it's somebody that, one, you actually want to hear from, and you're not going to just roll your eyes at their annoying feedback that they give you. And then 2, that it's actually somebody who can help and support you, so that it's somebody who has your best interest and that truly has that perspective of advancing into executive leadership, meaning they have done it themselves. They have walked the talk. So in these stakeholder interviews, I have done hundreds of them, well over 100 plus interviews. And in these interviews, I have learned certain things, and I wanted to share with you in today's episode some of the things that I have learned. Before I get into the stakeholder interviews, you might be somebody who has asked your boss for feedback in the past, or your boss's boss for feedback, and that is not what this episode is about. And the reason that I say that is because what they tell you is very different than what they tell me, and I'm going to kind of shine some light on that and show you why it's so important to have a third party do these types of interviews. The other thing is, it's important to note is that the way that I do stakeholder interviews is not like a regular 360 assessment where you're going to have a generic assessment sent out to 10 or 12 stakeholders at your company. Maybe some of these people are direct reports. And essentially what they're measuring in these blanket assessments is they're measuring your skills. They're not talking about what it's going to take to advance into executive leadership. And while some of these skills and, your ability to manage your team effectively, your ability to organize problems, to organize projects, or your ability to solve problems at your organization, while all of those skills are incredibly important, and I do coach on some of those skills, I'm always thinking about you and your career and what it's going to take to have you be successful at the next level. So a lot of times we're spending a ton of focus on what it's going to take to be successful at our current level. And then before you know it, you're like smarter than the rest of your team. You're overly successful at your current level. But guess what? You're staying exactly where you are, and other people are advancing in their careers. And here you are just stuck there waiting because you just want to prove yourself in that current level. So these stakeholder interviews that I do, I only interview 2 people. And that's incredibly important because these are people who are not your direct reports. They're not your peers. They are people who are above you in higher level leadership positions at your organization. So they know what it takes to advance at your organization. That's specifically what I'm talking to them about in these interviews. Again, I invite you to join our Leadership Table Mastermind if this is something that you want me to do for you. I am more than willing to do it. I absolutely love it, and it's a requirement for everybody who comes in. So the next piece that I want to share with you is that most of my clients who come into the Leadership Table Mastermind, while they might be a little bit excited about these stakeholder interviews, most of them procrastinate and don't want to do them. I think it makes sense. It's hard to get direct feedback from our boss and our boss's boss. I think it can feel a little bit scary to tell them that you have a coach because, as you may or may not know, 95% of my clients invest in the coaching themselves. They pay for it out of their own pocket. And this is also another key to their success because I am not indebted to your company. I care more about you than I do about your company's success. Sorry, not sorry. So in these stakeholder interviews, I just want to caveat this, that people aren't chomping at the bit, super excited about this. They're nervous because they don't know what the feedback is going to be. It's kind of scary to have somebody from the outside talk to their bosses. And some people don't have a very strong relationship with feedback. Like you might be somebody that when you get feedback directly, you kind of tailspin about it. I mean, I'm definitely one of those people. I don't like to receive feedback because I get a little bit upset and I internalize it and I make things a bigger problem than they are. And this is another place where coaching comes in so helpful, is because I interpret this feedback for you. So I give you what I think is actually going to serve you best. And I'm hopefully not going to send you into a tailspin, but I'm also going to tell it to you straight. If your boss is saying something over and over again, then I want you to know that this is what they're thinking and saying about you. Again, this is not something that they're necessarily going to say to your face. And if they have said it to your face, you haven't heard it in the same way that I can hear it as a third party. So the first thing to that end that I really want to set straight is almost every person that I interview loves the idea that I interviewed them and that their direct report has hired a coach, like nearly across the board. And I guess the other people just don't mention it, but a lot of people mention it. A lot of leaders mention it, that part of the strength of my client is the fact that they hired a coach, the fact that they walk the talk, the fact that they take their development seriously, the fact that they are really putting together a process to get feedback, because this is an executive leadership quality that you can solicit and organize and do something with feedback. So I want you to know that it is, from their lens, amazingly rewarding and popular. So a lot of executive leaders will give kudos to my clients simply for the fact that they hired their own coach out of their own pocket. They didn't make their development their boss's problem. If that's you, hard knocks, stop making your development your boss's problem and get yourself support. I really want you to just trust that. And I know that in these interviews, sometimes I'm talking and I'm asking questions about my client and I'm saying things like, what are their strengths and areas of improvement in terms of advancing into higher levels of leadership. But the fun part is that most of these stakeholders are more comfortable talking about themselves. So they'll sort of repeat the same 2 or 3 themes in the strengths and areas of improvement. But then when I ask the stakeholder questions about their own career journey and how they got where they are, and words of wisdom may or may not have to do with my client, they open up like a book. They have so much advice to share. And I share that part with you so that you can really know that your boss wants to talk about herself or himself. They really want to share and open up about their own journey. And so many of you are skipping that part. They love it. I'm telling you. And if you're not sure that they'll love it, try and see if they answer you. And if they don't, stop asking. But so many of these people, they would much rather give feedback about their own words of wisdom, how they got where they are. They don't necessarily want to talk about you, especially if they like you and you're doing well. And sometimes they'll have some very targeted stuff to say. I mean, obviously, these stakeholder interviews are incredibly effective. And usually the report that I put together is 5 or 6 pages of feedback just from 2 stakeholders. So I want you to know that that is a possibility, and that is something in a way that you can enter into this feedback loop without actually getting feedback about yourself. When I said that they'll tell me things that they haven't told you specifically, usually it's because a lot of the feedback that your boss or your boss's boss is giving you has to do with your work output, like a specific project or perhaps a mistake that you made. And they'll tell you right away and make sure you know about this mistake, or it comes up a lot in your performance review. But since these conversations are focused on what it's going to take to advance to the next level, they think about it differently, and they'll start to just share different types of ways that you could begin communicating, or relationships and exposure that you can start to build at the organization that maybe even they had never thought about before. And so what this does is it opens up opportunities for them to specifically help you. That is so key, because another piece, and today's episode is all about the things I've learned from these stakeholder interviews, is that they genuinely, for the most part, want to help you. Now, remember, I'm not interviewing your boss if they're the person who is not your best advocate. So a lot of these leaders, they genuinely want to help you, but they don't know how they can best support you. And I'm able to facilitate a conversation around that, literally just by asking questions, because I never say anything about my clients. I never divulge anything that we're working on. I just prompt them. I pull out things that they may or may not have just told you off the cuff. Now, when I give my clients this feedback, so they come out very nervous. They start out I don't know what this is going to be like. I noticed that they might not tell me directly. They'll just procrastinate scheduling them. It'll take a lot of follow-ups from me and my team to be able to actually get them scheduled. But then once they do it, another thing I learned is that my clients across the board are incredibly grateful for this feedback. Because, one, it gives them very measurable things that they can begin to work on. But 2, it opens the door to a conversation with their boss and their boss's boss about their development, particularly about their development and their advancement to the next level. So once we have this feedback, and I typically write down exactly what is said to me in these interviews verbatim. So I want you to know exactly what your boss and your boss's boss said about you. And then, of course, I'll add my interpretation on top of it. But I want you to have those words. And because I'm only interviewing 2 people, it opens the door for you to follow up with your boss and your boss's boss specifically about what they said so that you can better understand it. And then I can also coach you on what to ask them about so that we can all craft a development plan that truly works for you and truly advances you to that next level. So this is why my clients are just overwhelmingly grateful. Now I want to tell you a little bit of a surprise that happens in these feedback sessions. So sometimes when I interview your boss and your boss's boss, I'm not going to get a ton of feedback. And what that tells me, unfortunately, is that your boss or your boss's boss doesn't actually care about you that much. So you might have a positive relationship with your boss, but if there's somebody that's keep doing what you're doing, or maybe they don't really know what you need to work on to advance, they don't spend a lot of time thinking about you, this can be very telling in that they're not your ally, they're not your advocate. We have to go out and find some other people. And maybe perhaps if you truly want to advance, now a lot of people are very comfortable sitting in the level that they're at, doing a good job, showing up for work each day. It's easy, it's simple. But at any given time literally for all of my clients, but even for you listening, there's going to come a point where you're like, I want more. I want more money. I want a higher title. Why do we want that? Because we want that voice. We really want to be included in the conversation. And if you have a boss and a boss's boss that literally can't really think of anything to say about you, that's bad. And it's not good. It's a red flag. Another thing that I do really well for my clients in this interpretation of the report is tell them what I think is an actual deal breaker and what's not. And so somebody could think that their executive communication skills, like giving presentations to the board or something, is their deal breaker, but we can work on that. That's not necessarily a deal breaker. What is a real deal breaker is if your boss is not invested in you. That's huge. And sometimes we think our boss is not invested in us and we're wrong because I get them to open up and say everything about you. And then sometimes we think that our boss is invested in us just because our relationship with them is neutral or basically good. And we're wrong because they're not actually invested in us. I'll give you a surprise feedback that I quote this a lot because it was so fantastic, but a lot of these stakeholder interviews can directly lead to a promotion within the next 6 months. Literally just because I had the conversation, I allowed your boss to really think about what it's going to take to get your development plan. You follow up with them, you put together that plan, you map it all out. It's amazing. It's so clear and precise that it can't help but lead to the next level promotion. So here's an example. There was a woman who was a senior vice president and she reported directly into her CEO, but she wanted to become the COO at her organization. And there was a gap in the COO position. There wasn't an actual COO at her company. And she had been trying for a while to fill this seat. And when I had the conversation with the CEO about her development and stuff, he had a lot of very positive things to say about her, a lot of her strengths. He really had a ton of trust in her. And when it came to the areas of improvement, he couldn't really name a lot of things that she needed to improve. So I could tell that his wheels were really turning in this conversation. And he was trying to think for himself why she couldn't advance at their organization to the next level. And then he just flat out said to me, there's nobody else who can do her job. If she becomes the COO, we're screwed. We can't lose her where she currently sits. Now, this is not something that he would tell her directly. It's kind of weird to tell her that. But to me, he's confiding, he's being honest, he's thinking out loud. So what did I do? I went back to my client and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's just why? If nobody else can do my job, that's horrible. And I'm like, no, it just means that in order to advance, you just need to figure out who your succession plan is. If it's multiple people or if it's one person, we need to put that plan together, then communicate that plan with your CEO, and you'll be promoted. I was like, it's so clear and so simple. That's what we did. And she was promoted 3 months later. So I want you to see the doors that start to open from these stakeholder interviews. Now, if you don't have a coach right now, then you can, one, hire me. That is totally always an option for you. But you can also, rather than thinking about the feedback approach where it's oh, I need to have a meeting with my boss or my boss's boss and get feedback, remember what I said. It's harder for them to talk to you directly and give you feedback. So instead, schedule a meeting with your boss to understand what it took for them to advance into the levels of leadership that they're currently in. Schedule a meeting with your boss or your boss's boss and ask them, how did they get to the role that they're currently in? What were some of the things that they had to learn along the way? And what were some of the things that they had to let go of? And you can even say, I may or may not need to do that, but I'm just asking because I want to learn from you. And this would be an important thing to include, as I continue to advance my career. So I want to learn from you about your process. Much, much easier for them to talk about themselves. And then you just need to be a student of that information and figure out what applies to you and begin to process it and implement it. And you can even go back and create an ongoing dialogue with your boss about what they did to advance and how you're applying it. It's the magic sauce, my friends. It's unbelievable. And you can do that for yourself today. So if you go do that, let me know how it goes. Send me a direct message. If it works, if it doesn't work, I don't even care. Go on Apple iTunes, give me a review for this podcast. We need to let other people know about this incredible information. We need more powerhouse women in the executive suite. We need to lift up more women from the lower levels of leadership into the executive suite. And this podcast, even today's episode, will help them do that. So I need your support and your help to go out and recruit more and more people. I'm going to be celebrating every single promotion that comes across my desk, whether they're a direct client of mine or an indirect or a second degree connection or a third degree connection. We are going to celebrate over 432 promotions as part of the Summer of Magic. I need your support to make that happen. And this podcast has all of the tools available for you to get promoted even while you're on vacation this summer. All right, my friends, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Before you go, I have a question for you. Do you know how close you are to your next promotion? Really? Not what your boss has told you, not what you even believe to be true, but have you actually taken the time to sit down, take an assessment, review the 5 categories that it takes to get promoted into senior executive leadership positions and decided where you fall in each category and given yourself a ranking on a scale of 1 to 10 of how close you are to getting your next promotion? Have you done this? Well, now's your chance. If that feels interesting to you and you're like, hey, I want to know exactly how close I might actually be or how far away you might be and what it's going to take to get you even closer, then I invite you to take my promotability quiz. This is a quiz that I put together with practical tips that actually tell you where you're lacking and where you're winning. What are the areas that you actually need to improve and not necessarily what your boss is telling you all the time so that you can take concrete steps towards landing that next promotion and changing the face of the leadership table. Go to yourpromotabilityscore.com to take your free assessment today. Yourpromotabilityscore.com and let me know how it goes.